Welcome back to this next video, and in this video we are going to talk about the types of the signaling. And in this particular video we'll be focusing on an overview of the different type of the signalings that exist in the living world. When you talk about the signalings, the two important things, they are the ligands and the receptors. I have a detailed video on the ligands and the receptors, and I will share the link in the description. But these ligands, also known as the signaling molecules, they are the molecules which are released by the signaling cells, and these ligands are responsible for transmitting information between the cells, which we call the intercellular signaling, or transmitting information within a cell, which we call as the intracellular signaling. So these ligands, or these signaling molecules produced by these signaling cells, are responsible for transmitting information between cells and within a cell in the body. Now, in order to transmit information between cell or within a cell, these ligands actually interact with the receptors which are present on the target cells, and this is actually the interaction of the ligand and the receptor, which is responsible for generating a cellular response. And now in the living system you will find a lot of ligands, you will find a lot of receptors, but the ligand and the receptor interaction, that is very specific. Specific ligands, they are going to interact with specific receptors, and this is the interaction of the specific ligand specific receptor interaction that is responsible for generating a particular cellular response. If you talk about the types of the signalings, we broadly classify them into 4 types, and I'll be just giving you an overview of these 4 types of the signaling that is there in the living world. The first type, that is known as the paracrine signaling, or it is also known as the short range signaling. Now, as the name indicates, you're talking about short range signaling. Therefore, this kind of the signaling, they involve the cells within a local neighborhood. Say for example, if this is a cell, the signaling cell, which is producing these ligands or these signals, and if you look at these ligands, they are interacting with the target cells which are present very close to them. They are present in their local neighborhood, or you can say they are physically very close to each other. So the signaling cells and the cell in which a cellular response is generated, they are present very close to each other. Therefore, we call them as the short range signaling. The famous examples of the paracrine signaling, they are the fibroblast growth factors, which are the growth factor responsible for stimulation of proliferation and differentiation in the cells. And the another important example is the interferon response when there is a viral infection. So both the interferon and the fibroblast growth factor, they are the examples of the short range signaling or the paracrine signaling. Now the question is why the paracrine signals can only generate a short range signaling. How the body is ensuring that these paracrine signals will generate a short range signaling. Now there are 3 explanations for this. The first one is that the receptors for these signals or these paracrine ligands, they are present on the nearby cells. So if you look at over here, this is the ligand or the signal, and these are the receptors for this ligand, and as you can see, they are present on the nearby cells. So the ligand is going to interact with the receptor, therefore it cannot move far away from these cells, or it cannot generate a long range signaling. Another important thing is that you all know that the cells, they have got an extensive extracellular matrix, and these extracellular matrix are actually immobilizing these paracrine ligands, thereby ensuring a local response. Another important thing is that when the signal, it binds to its receptor and it generates a cellular response in the target cell, then this ligand is actually released from this receptor after it has performed its function. So when the ligand that is released from the receptor, the enzymes which are present in the extracellular matrix, they are going to destroy these ligands, and when they are destroyed, that means they will no more be able to perform their function. So these actions, the attachment to a receptor present on the nearby cells, the immobilization by the extracellular matrix, or destruction by the extracellular enzymes, these actions are ensuring local influence without spreading to the remote cells in case of the paracrine signaling. Another type of the signaling that is called is the autocrine signaling. Now, autocrine signaling is a form of cell signaling in which a cell secretes hormones or chemical messenger. We specifically call these autocrine signals is the autocrine agents, and that bind to the autocrine receptors on that same cell, leading to the changes in the cell. That means that if this is the cell, this is going to release these signals, and these signals are going to bind to this same cell. So there is one cell which is releasing the signal, and these signals are attaching to that same cell. Therefore, we call that is the autocrine signaling. Now, this is in contrast to the paracrine or the endocrine signaling, in which the signaling cells and the target cells, they are different from each other. But in case of the autocrine signaling, the cell which is producing the signal is also having a receptor for those ligands or signals, and they bind to the same cell. So if this is one cell that is releasing the ligand, the receptor is also present on the same cell, and the ligand, they are going to bind to this. So this is known as the autocrine signaling. If you look at some of the examples of the autocrine signaling, the cytokine interleukin 1 in the monocyte, it is one of the famous examples of the autocrine signaling. When the interleukin 1 is produced in response to the external stimuli, it can bind to the cell surface receptor on their same cells. The same monocyte is producing the interleukin 1, and that leukin is going to bind to this same monocyte. Another example is the activated T cells. When in the activated T cells, the cell release the interleukin 2, and it binds to the interleukin 2 receptor which is present on that same cell, and by binding so, it is actually causing the self-stimulation and ultimately a monoclonal population of the T cell that is produced. Another important example of the autocrine signaling is the tumors. Now, one approach that the tumor used to upregulate growth and survival is through the autocrine agent production, and by the production of the autocrine agents, they are actually increasing their growth and their survival. The third type of the signaling that is called is the endocrine signaling, or it is also called is the long range signaling. So this will be in contrast to the paracrine signaling, which was the short range signaling. Now, in the endocrine signaling, special cells which are called is the endocrine cells. These endocrine cells, they release the signaling molecules which are called is the hormones, and these hormones utilize the bloodstream as a media, and utilizing the bloodstream as a media, it reach to the cells which are present far away from them. So in the endocrine signaling, the hormone produced by these endocrine cells, they move through the bloodstream to the body parts which are widely distributed throughout the body. Like, for example, if you look at this one, if this is an endocrine cell, it is producing a signal, although this target cell is present very far away from the signaling cells. Therefore, it uses this bloodstream as a media. So the ligand moves through the blood, and it go and binds to the receptor which is present on the target cell. So here the signaling cells and the target cells, they are physically very far away from each other. They are cell targets, distant cells through the bloodstream. If you talk about the major endocrine glands in your body, one of the important gland is the pituitary gland. You have got the pancreas, the ovaries, the testes, and the adrenal glands. They are some of the major endocrine glands present in the human body. If you look at the examples of the endocrine signals, they are insulin can be one of the example of the endocrine signals which is produced by the pancreas. Epinephrine will be another example that is produced by the adrenal glands, and the thyroid stimulating hormone which is produced by the pituitary gland. The insulin is responsible for the homeostasis of the blood glucose level in the body. The epinephrine is you can say involved in the fight and the flight response, and the thyroid stimulating hormone is responsible for the generation of the thyroid hormones. The last type of the signaling, that is the neuronal signaling, or you can call it as the neurotransmission. Now in the neurotransmission, the signaling molecules, they are called as the neurotransmitters. Now these neurotransmitters, they are released by the presynaptic neuron. The neurotransmitters are released by the presynaptic neuron, and they are going to bind to the receptors which are present on the postsynaptic neuron. And when this neurotransmitter released by the presynaptic neuron bind to the receptors on the postsynaptic neuron, this is responsible for generation of a cellular response. So if you can see over here, this is a very general diagram of the neurotransmission. This one, if you can see over here, this whole is the axon terminal of the presynaptic neuron. Now at the axon terminal of the presynaptic neuron, you have got these synaptic vesicles, or you can call them as the neurotransmitter vesicles, and inside these vesicles you have got these neurotransmitters. When you are transferring the message from one neuron to another neuron, on the terminal of the presynaptic neuron, on the axon terminal, there are the voltage gated calcium channels, and when the signal reaches over here, these channels, they open, the calcium moves into the axon terminal, and when the calcium concentration is increased in the axon terminal of the presynaptic neuron, these neurotransmitter vesicles, they actually fuse with the membrane of the presynaptic neuron, thereby releasing these neurotransmitters. And when they are released, there are receptors on the postsynaptic neuron, and these receptors are going to receive these neurotransmitters, thereby generating a cellular response. If you look at the examples of the neurotransmitters, the famous one, they are the dopamine, the gamma aminobutyric acids. We will continue the discussion in the next video.